the goal is for us to understand them well enough, to help them understand themselves well enough without shame and judgment, so that we can help them begin to learn to manage themselves. And that notion that change is a process of acceptance and understanding.
You're listening to Parenting with Impact, the podcast for parents like you, raising complex kids to become capable, independent adults, even in this complicated world. Each episode brings expert insights and real-life strategies to help you parent with confidence, calm, and clarity. Here are your hosts, Elaine and Diane.
Welcome back, everybody, to another conversation in the Parenting with Impact podcast. Today is a celebration.
Yay.
And we're big fans of celebration. This one is in particularly kind of interesting. This week is the 4th anniversary of the podcast. And today launches, the day that this is being released, launches the 14th anniversary of the launch of our very first website of impactadhd.com, which today is my birthday when this is coming out, right? Which launched on August 13th. 2011. And so here we are, 15 years into our in relationship with each other, 14 years of Impact ADHD, Impact Parents, and lots and lots to celebrate.
Should we say happy birthday? We should say happy birthday, even though when we're recording it, it's technically not your birthday, but today is your birthday when they're listening to this.
Well, if you're singing, I'll take it.
Oh, I'm like, no, I said saying. Let's celebrate.
Say. I'll take the say. Great.
Y'all can sing. Y'all can imagine me singing, and we can move on.
So what we thought we would do today, folks, is talk a little bit about, in the realm of celebration, we always talk about what's worked, what hasn't worked, what will we do differently, the magic 3 questions. But we thought we'd start with kind of, how has this evolved? Like, where were we when we started? Where are we now? What's changed and maybe what hasn't changed? Because I think that's almost as interesting. So where do you want to start, Diane?
It's really funny because what came up for me just as you said that was, I was trying to reflect on how deep into the struggle of parenting I was 14 years ago. And we were just reflecting, like, the other thing that's going on is that I've got a new grandbaby. And so we were talking about how hard were kids when they were really little, and we were having kind of reflection time before we started recording. And I was thinking about how thick I was into it, and how kind of in fix-it mode I was. And we talk about this a lot, but it's this sort of, I was learning so much, and I was in that sort of, I've got to get more information.
Information, key word.
Information, right? And I had already been through coach training. And so what I was doing naturally at that time was balancing the information with the integration, right? And I was doing it, but I wasn't doing it consciously. I was just kind of doing it. And I think when we met, we always talk about the fact that we recognized that when we became coaches, we became much better parents, but I don't think we understood that not getting stuck in the information, but moving into the experimentation and the action was part of what made that happen, right? And so, I don't know, for me, there was a sense of, oh my gosh, we have to do something, energy behind it, because there was part of me that's like, okay, we can't survive like this. There was a lot of that kind of spinning in my head, and
the desperation.
You, right? Yeah.
Sorry, I missed what you said. I cut you off. What I was hearing was that energy of desperation that parents come to this with a lot.
Yes. And I was balanced enough that I wasn't freaking out at the time. And I was still in that sort of, we have to do something. Let's do something. Parents are struggling everywhere. And I think that was the piece of it, is that there was nothing that either of us found that was robust enough that really supported us effectively. And I think that that's the piece of it. There was a lot of information. We were when we met, we were at an international ADHD conference. We were soaking up the information, and it really felt like it wasn't enough. And I think that that's really what's coming to me right now, is this sort of, the reason it wasn't enough is because it's not information is not enough, folks. We can't say that enough.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's very true. I'm thinking for me, so by the time you and I met, I'd been a coach for a few years, right? And I think I had been dealing with complex kids longer because my eldest kid, we were just talking about this a little while ago. The challenges we faced started in about 2 weeks, and there were lots of other things before we got to neurodiversity, lots of health issues um, that that made life complicated, right? And so I think by the time you and I met, it's funny when I think back to the first program we created was Minimize Meltdowns, and we talked about exactly this issue of prevention versus management. And I think I was very much in I can't fix this, so I got to learn to manage it place already,
Mhm.
right? Because the information had not been helping enough. But becoming a coach and learning a coach approach was helping. And it was changing the way that I was communicating, which was ultimately changing what was going on for my kids. And so for me at that point, my youngest was about 9 or 10, and my eldest was about 15 years old. So it was really interesting over the years to watch the differences in them as depending on how young they were when they were exposed to coaching,
Yeah.
really. So I think for most parents who come into this world with us, what hasn't changed, one of the things that hasn't changed is that fear and frustration energy that parents come to us with. Is that fair?
It is, and the piece that I think that comes on top of that is and and it's about and it's on some level about me, right? It's just sort of there are a lot of parents who struggle with their kids' behavior, and I think a lot of times when people end up in our circle, it's because they recognize on some level, okay, wait, yes, this is about my kid's challenge, and I want to do something different
Hmm.
to support them. And I think that that's the piece that, when I talk about my story with my kids, it's like I knew that their brains were wired differently. I knew that there was something that I was missing, but because my brain's not wired like theirs, I couldn't figure out what the secret sauce was. But I knew that there was something there and that I could do something that could support them in their differentness. That makes
Yeah. Yeah, totally makes sense. And I think what we both found was what we could do differently had to do with down regulating our emotional reactivity and communicating in a more effective, what we would call a coach approach way.
well,
Right.
and I think
And
that
problem solving differently too, maybe.
I think that the role, I think part of what we wanted to talk about today is like the things that we've learned and has evolved. And I think that the thing you just said about down regulating your own reactivity is one of the things that I think has just become so critical in the thinking and the work. I was just on the phone with a client this morning and just over and over and over again, it's just sort of, okay, yes, my kid is saying things that are just unacceptable and they're riling me up and it's like, what do I do to get enough of a breath and a space so that I can down regulate, so I can co-regulate, so that I can solve the problem? And I think that that's the piece of it is that for me, and part of this has been getting more time and space away from the times where I was so completely dysregulated to go, oh, wait, this is a key part of this whole challenge. And whether your dysregulation is overwhelm or whether your dysregulation is more frustration and fear or worry or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. I think that that piece of it has become such a key component that we're dealing with nervous system. I mean, I say this all the time. It's like we're all neurodiverse when we're overwhelmed. We're all
Yeah.
neurodiverse when we're afraid. We're all neurodiverse when we're worried. And so all those struggles that our kids have, if we're not in our right mind, we're like right with them in the soup.
Yeah, well, I mean, think about it. When we first started, nobody was yet talking about polyvagal theory,
Mhm.
and people weren't
Oh, that's a
talking
new
about our nervous systems being
We
dysregulated.
weren't even kind of talking about trauma explicitly or the breadth of it. I mean, people knew about it, but trauma informed whatever was not. on most people's radars.
Radar. Well, this one cracks me up. When we first started this work, it was still Impact ADHD, right? The company is actually Impact ADHD. Um, Emotional regulation was not considered part of ADHD in those days. Like, we didn't even yet have Dr. Brown's research and some of the other research to show us that it's actually a part of the executive function system, and that in order to manage emotional regulation, we have to be able to tap in, right? That
Well,
we
and
didn't know. And we didn't know it was happening.
Well, and I'm laughing because we like this year we redid. I mean, the first program we created was Minimize Meltdowns, and we redid it as a master class this year. And I think about how much of the original Minimize Meltdowns was about little kids melting down, and how much of this version of Minimize Meltdowns was about regulating the nervous system of the entire family system, right?
Yeah.
And that's a great indication of the evolution of this. And what's important about that is that lens of what can we do? What can we do? What part of this equation are we? And how do we manage what is in our circle to manage, knowing that there's all kinds of things that we can't control?
Yeah, for sure. Let's take a quick break. And then I have a question to pose to us. Hold on one second.
Do you recognize current ADHD interventions fall short? At Dig Coaching, we have developed a new field of engineering and a new ADHD intervention called cognitive ergonomics from the inside out. To learn more, visit cognitive-ergonomics.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to the anniversary edition of the Parenting with Impact podcast. It's our 4th year producing this podcast, and we've been talking about what the world was like when we started Impact ADHD back in 2011, and what things were like there, and how much clearer we are. It's not that the issues have changed necessarily, but we understand them so much better, and we understand how important our role as parents is. And in what way, I think, differently from back then. The question I want to pose to us, I'm kind of curious to look at, is we understand the emotional dysregulation of the nervous system. We've also learned a lot about how change happens. And this notion that you just got to change it is an old school thought, right? You don't just change it because you know you should, or you think you should, or you want to. Change is a complicated process, especially when, as parents, we're dealing with independent, autonomous human beings as our children. So what comes up for you around change?
Well, the first thing, I'll just put a pin in it, but the connection back to the dysregulation, because the minute we get overwhelmed, frustrated, emotional, we get into fix-it mode. And it's so not only does it have to change, it has to change immediately. And I'm the only one that can change it. Or they're the only ones that can change. So there's this urgency of
change.
It has to change. And so if that happens to be you that has that thought running through your head, it might be a really good indication that you're overcome by the emotions, whether it's overwhelm or worry or frustration or whatever it is. So pin in that.
Yeah.
And no, I think that is important piece, is that change
Is a process.
It's how does it change, what does change really look at? Again, I was on this mom I was on the phone with this morning, 13, remembering back to when they were 8, and it's they were having a really hard time seeing the differences. And the differences are significant, but the kid underneath it still has the same struggles, because the kid is going to have these struggles. The 13-year-old version of the struggles look different than the 8-year-old version of the struggles. And so I think for me, part of what comes up when I think about change is change doesn't mean fixed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's this sort of, if we're talking about, let's look at the process and not the outcome. So much of our world, our society, our goals in this are okay, I got to be done with this, as opposed to, okay, look at what's happening. Look at what's changed. Look at what we know about things. So what's
the progress?
Yeah. What's the progress? What's up for you about change?
Well, so I think the biggest piece for me was understanding that the goal isn't the structure. That everybody kept telling me, you need to be consistent. You need to put systems in place. You need to use structures, right? Now I'm an adult with ADD. I didn't know it in the early years. And so consistency is hard for me and structures were hard for me. And so I thought the goal was the reward chart.
Mm.
I didn't understand that the point of the reward chart was to help me and helping my kid learn to manage their behaviors. And so that's a distinction that's really important, that the goal here is to help them manage themselves or to help us manage ourselves. The goal is not actually whether they do well on the test or whether they, whether things every morning is a smooth morning. The goal is to help them understand themselves well enough, for us to understand them well enough, to help them understand themselves well enough without shame and judgment, so that we can help them begin to learn to manage themselves. And that notion that change is a process of acceptance and understanding is something that really took me a while to really get clear on. It's this meta of awareness of it,
And what's coming up as you're describing that is that thing underneath a thing underneath a thing, right? It's this sort
Yeah.
of, it's not just the system, but and it's not just the behavior that we're trying to change under the system, but it's the executive function under the behavior, under the, it's like all of that kind of really getting clear about what am I really focusing in on, and
Mhm.
not just starting with the surface stuff,
Yeah.
but really going underneath. And a lot of times it's not what's going on with my kid. What's really going on, and I tell this story on myself all the time, we're worried about getting out the door on time for school. And what's really going on is that I'm hearing my dad's voice in my head, and I'm afraid that I'm going to get in trouble because my kids are going to be late for school. And it's like, okay, wait a second. Dad's not here to get me in trouble. I'm 40
Right.
years old. I'm not going to get in trouble. I mean, all of the things, you've got to have enough space, not just to have the vision for the change, but to know what you're really trying to change. Does that make sense?
Right. And yes, it makes total sense. And the other piece, so you're focused on you, right?
Right.
Rightly so. The other piece that it's becoming clear just in this conversation is, like, we have grown to understand the role of buy-in and motivation and the complexity of it and the nuance of it. And part of what happens with parenting is that sometimes we can get compliance from our kids, but that's not the same thing as getting them to buy into managing themselves and helping them find their motivation to manage themselves. And that's the golden ticket, is helping them be part of the solution, if you want to use that word, or be part of the management, because they're the ones that really stand to benefit. And if we can help them see the benefit, what's in it for them, instead of just doing it to please us, especially as they become teenagers, that really shifts everything, because that's the enrollment of them in their life. And that's really the long goal that we're looking for.
Well, and I think that's when I think about the things that are different now than they were 15 years ago. I think that the part of what's evolved in our work is, how do you support older kids, right?
Yeah.
Our young adults group is thriving. Parents of young adults group is thriving now. And I don't know that we would have been able to support them in the same way that we do now, because we haven't had it in our work, right? And so the movement from, I think that where we started as coaches was collaborative directors, right? It's this sort of, we're bringing our kids in, we're making sure they're hearing their agenda, we're supporting them, and we're working with them, we're giving them agency, we're doing all the things, right? Because we were working with, young teens and elementary age kids at the time. And as we bumped into, oh, wait, teenager wants even more agency, doesn't want us to tell them what to do, even though they need us to tell them what to do. I mean, all the things that we talk about when we teach the 4 roles of the parent, we evolved through that
Into collaborative supporters.
And then into supportive champions, right?
Right.
Which is where I think both of us are now with our young adult kids, who
Yeah.
never offer help unless somebody says yes, they want it. Or at least we hope we never offer help unless
We try not to. Yeah.
try not to without permission, right? But I think that that's the piece of it, is that the tools, and I think that this is the thing I want those of you who are listening who have younger kids to in your circle is that the tools that you need when your kids are younger evolve into different tools. I don't know how else to say that.
I'm going to say they're the same tools that you begin to apply them differently,
Okay.
right? They're the same tools. That's why this works for parents of younger kids or teens or older kids, because the tools don't change, but which ones you choose or how you use
How to
them
apply it.
tweaks as the kids get older.
Yeah.
Helping them understand motivation. Maybe when they're younger, you might be providing them with the motivation, and as they get older, you might be helping them find their own motivation. Certainly, the tools that we use, ACE or the design or permission, breadcrumbs, those are all tools that we use with kids at all ages. But you might use more asking permission for a 17-year-old than you would for a 7-year-old,
Mhm.
right? You're gonna maybe apply them a little differently. The other thing I know we have to wrap soon. The other thing I wanted to mention was how dramatically the world has changed in terms of technology. When we first started, we were still at the beginning years. My joke is that only one of my kids is older than Google, right? So we were still at the early years of technology, and we were actually early adopters of technology. Part of the reason we were able to do this is because we went online immediately at an early stage. But what families are dealing with now in terms of technology is so much more pervasive than it was when our kids were younger. Um, and yet the same tools apply. Like, one of the things we learned is that if we don't try to treat technology as if it's something different from everything else, and we recognize that it's another conversation we're having with our kids, another relationship we want to guide them into being in relationship with, we can really navigate it with them better than if we try to assume that it's totally different. So the world is totally different, but the conversation around it is still the same parenting conversation from director to collaborator, supporter to champion.
Oh, and what's coming up around this is that the world is moving faster.
Yeah.
And so that tendency to, I've got to fix this, I've got to move this, like I've got to keep up with it. I had a parent the other day of a 13-year-old who's like, my kid was doing something dangerous on her phone. I just took her phone away. I mean, I'm like, oh, okay. Like, are you open to a conversation about when she's going to get it back or how she's going to, like, this
Need to be in relationship with that.
it's
Right. Well, our tendency is to want to shut it down, but this is the world. And I'm sure you do. I say this in my parenting groups all the time in different ways, but we are not raising kids in the world we were raised in. Any of us, even the youngest amongst us, are not raising kids in the world we were raised in. And so we have to adapt. And I think the coaching tools give us the capacity really well to adapt to the world we're in instead of the world we want to be in or thought we would be in or hope we could be in. Which is, another theme throughout is, being with the kid we've got instead of trying to parent the kid we wished we had, right? That acceptance is always a kind of a through line in our community, I think, as well.
Well, and I think that that's kind of the way I want to close this is that, the things that there's so many things that have changed and evolved. There's so many things that have not changed. And I think that that's the piece of it that I love. We were presenting our model recently, and I was looking at it and I'm like, we really have not changed a whole, there's like 2 little teeny tiny things that we've changed in the last 15 years. And it's still solid change management, neurodiversity informed.
Yeah.
And I think it's that piece of it that wherever you're struggling, if you've got a 22-year-old or you've got a 7-year-old, that's the piece that I love. It's like, this works for everybody.
Yeah. Starting with us.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. And I'm trying to think, like, how do I want to wrap? Like, it's been an amazing journey. I guess the other thing I want to say, Diane, is I really want to celebrate that you and I have had the privilege of supporting parents on 6 continents in hundreds of countries, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of parents over the years. I mean, that's extraordinary to me. And, and, this is just the beginning of bringing the way that we bring and that I and others have really begun to bring neuro-informed coaching into the world. I was talking to Cindy Goldrich the other day, and we were just talking about how, we were early on doing this, and now there's lots and lots of people doing it. And it's such a powerful way to be in relationship with kids. And so I think that's how I'd like to wrap this, is to just invite those of you listening to trust the process of this approach to being in relationship with people. I was talking to my kids over the weekend about the biggest thing in my life that changed as a parent was when I began to trust and see the possibility of what they could do instead of only looking at what they couldn't. And coaching is what gave me that access point to see what was possible for them and to invite them into that. And that's my reminder to those of you listening, is that you're here, you're listening because there's something about this that resonates with you, and because you want to be in relationship with your kids in a strong, healthy, strength-based way. And we really want to acknowledge you for that and love that you're part of this journey with us, because that's really, at the end of the day, what it's all about, right?
Well, and the thing that I want to just say for me was that it's the moment that you get from a place of this is a problem to be fixed to this is a lifetime to be shared, right? It's like lifetimes to share with these kids. And if you can, doesn't mean we don't have challenges. It doesn't mean that we don't have hard times, but if it's not a problem to fix, if we're down-regulated enough to go, okay, how do I address what's going on with grace and compassion and a little bit of my own head on my shoulders?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That can make all the difference.
Our journey is to be with them on their journey, right? And to be self-regulated and engaged and compassionate along the way. All right, my friends, thank you for tuning in. Thanks for sharing this little reflection moment with us. We appreciate you being part of the community, and we will see you in the next conversation.
Thanks,
bye, everybody.
You've been listening to the Parenting with Impact podcast with Elaine and Diane. For more information on the Impact Parents community or to join Sanity School for Parents, please visit impactparents.com. If you like what you've heard, please share this podcast with friends who need similar guidance and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.